My name is Amira Al-Rashid. I am 28 years old. And on March 15th, 2023, at exactly 6:47 in the morning, I was 7 minutes away from execution in a secret prison buried deep in the Saudi Arabian desert. My crime? A Bible. A single, worn copy of the New Testament that I had hidden inside a false compartment of my Louis Vuitton luggage. 7 minutes. That's all I had left. I could hear the footsteps of the guards echoing down the concrete corridor. Heavy boots on stone. The kind of sound that tells you there's no turning back. Through the small barred window of my cell, I could see the execution courtyard being prepared. The sword, polished, gleaming in the early desert sun. The executioner performing his ritual prayers. And I remember thinking, this is how a Saudi princess dies. Not in a palace of marble and gold, but in the sand, forgotten, erased from history as if I never existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand how I ended up 7 minutes from death, you need to understand the golden cage I was born into. And you need to understand that sometimes the most dangerous prisons aren't the ones with bars, they're the ones with chandeliers. I was born into Saudi royalty. Not just wealth, royalty. My father was Prince Khalid al-Rashid, a senior advisor to the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. Our family owned palaces in Riyadh, London, and Monaco. I had my own jet before I could legally drive. I studied at Oxford. I dined with presidents and prime ministers. I wore designer gowns that cost more than most people earn in a year. From the outside, my life looked like a fairy tale. But fairy tales don't include being married off at 16 to your cousin, a man 40 years older than you, with 3 other wives already. Fairy tales don't include lying awake at night in silk sheets, staring at ceiling frescoes imported from Italy, while your soul screams in a silence no one can hear. Fairy tales don't include performing ablution, the ritual washing of hands, face, and feet before each of the 5 daily prayers that Muslims must complete, while feeling absolutely nothing inside. Just cold water running over cold skin, and a heart that felt even colder. Have you ever felt completely alone while surrounded by people? Have you ever worn a smile like a mask while everything inside you is dying? That was my life for years. I was Princess Amira in public, graceful, obedient, the perfect example of a modern Saudi woman who knew her place. I attended state functions. I said the right things. I bowed my head at the right moments. But inside, I was disappearing. My husband, I won't speak his name, treated me like a decorative object. Something to display at diplomatic events, then lock away when guests left. The palace guards monitored my every movement. My phone was checked daily. My conversations were reported. Even my female servants were spies, making sure I never stepped out of line, never questioned, never challenged the system that owned me. I had everything money could buy, and I had nothing that mattered. The turning point came when I was 24 years old. My father was invited to a diplomatic conference in London, and I was permitted to accompany him, with 6 bodyguards, of course, and strict instructions about where I could and couldn't go. On the second day, during a rare moment of freedom while my guards waited outside a luxury boutique on Bond Street, I saw something across the street that made me stop. A church. St. Mary's Anglican Church. Small, old, made of gray stone that looked ancient compared to the glass skyscrapers surrounding it. I don't know why I crossed the street. I don't know what pulled me toward those wooden doors. But I told my guards I needed to use a restroom, women's issues, the kind of thing that makes men uncomfortable enough not to ask questions, and I slipped inside. The church was empty, completely silent except for the sound of my heels on the stone floor. Light filtered through stained glass windows, painting patterns of blue and gold across wooden pews that had been polished smooth by centuries of prayers. And there, on one of the benches, someone had left a book. A Bible. New Testament. English. With a worn leather cover and pages that had been read so many times they fell open naturally to the Gospel of John. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. In Saudi Arabia, possessing a Bible can get you imprisoned. Distributing Bibles can get you executed. And here I was, a princess of the royal family, holding one in my hands like it was made of fire. I should have put it down. I should have walked away. Instead, I hid it in my Hermes handbag and walked out of that church with my heart pounding so hard I thought the guards could hear it. That Bible made it through Saudi customs in a false bottom I created in my luggage. And for the next 18 months, it became my most dangerous secret. I read it at 3 a.m, locked in the marble bathroom of my palace suite with a shower running to cover any sound. I read it by the light of my phone, one verse at a time, always ready to hide it if I heard footsteps in the corridor. I read about a man named Jesus who said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest. What a foreign concept. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt rest. I read about a God who loved prostitutes and tax collectors and Samaritans, the outcasts, the rejected, the ones society considered worthless. I read about forgiveness that wasn't earned through ritual washing or perfect prayers or good deeds that could never be good enough. I read about grace, a word that doesn't even have a direct translation in Arabic because grace isn't something Islam teaches. In Islam, everything is about scales and balance, earning paradise through deeds, never being certain if you've done enough. But Jesus offered something different. He offered certainty. He offered love that didn't have conditions attached. He offered freedom. And slowly, secretly, dangerously, I started to fall in love with him. Can you imagine discovering that everything you were taught your entire life might be wrong? Can you imagine finding truth in the one book your culture says is corrupted and false? By the time I turned 26, I was living two completely different lives. In public, I was Princess Amira, attending Friday prayers at the Grand Mosque, fasting during Ramadan, performing Hajj pilgrimage with my family, reciting Quranic verses at state functions. But in private, at 3 a.m, I was talking to Jesus like he was in the room with me. And the strangest thing was, he felt more real than anything else in my life. During Ramadan of 2022, while my family was hosting a lavish iftar dinner, the evening meal where Muslims break their daily fast, I excused myself, saying I felt unwell. I went to my room, locked the door, and I knelt on the Persian rug beside my bed. And I prayed a prayer that I knew would cost me everything. Jesus, I don't fully understand you. I don't know if I'm making a mistake. But I can't keep living this lie. If you're real, if you really are who you say you are, then I give you my life. All of it, even if it costs me everything. The room filled with peace. Not the cold, obligatory peace of Islamic prayer that always felt like checking boxes on a spiritual to-do list. This was different. This was warm, personal, alive. Like being wrapped in light. I had become a Christian. In Saudi Arabia, in the royal family. And I knew I could never go back. For 8 months, I managed to keep my conversion secret. I found a hidden network of Saudi Christians. Yes, they exist, living in the shadows, meeting in basements and borrowed apartments, worshiping the God who says, "Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven." We were maybe 30 people in a city of 7 million. We took communion using grape juice hidden in water bottles and bread we pretended was just a snack. We baptized each other in hotel swimming pools during business trips, always watching for security cameras. I was baptized in Dubai at 2 a.m. in the pool of the Burj Al Arab Hotel. My friend Fatima, another ex-Muslim convert, held me under the water and whispered, "Buried with Christ in death, raised with him in new life." When I came up out of that water, I felt clean for the first time since my wedding night at 16. Clean in a way that 5 daily ablutions and a lifetime of Islamic rituals had never made me feel. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Especially not in palaces where servants report to your father and walls have ears. Her name was Noor. She had been my personal attendant for 3 years. I thought she was my friend. I thought wrong. It was January 8th, 2023. I was packing for a trip to Paris, another diplomatic function my father required me to attend. Noor was helping me pack, folding clothes with the precision she'd been trained for since childhood. I had stepped into the bathroom for just 5 minutes. When I came back, she was standing frozen in the middle of my bedroom, holding my Bible. The false compartment in my luggage had malfunctioned. The bottom panel had popped open. Our eyes met, and I watched her face transform from shock to terror, because she knew what she was holding. And she knew that by knowing, she was now complicit. In Saudi Arabia, if you discover apostasy and don't report it, you become guilty too. Princess, her voice was shaking. I didn't mean to. Nor, please. I moved toward her slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. Please let me explain. But I could see it in her eyes. She was already making calculations. Her family versus mine. Her life versus my secret. She ran from the room with the Bible in her hands. 20 minutes later, my father's guards stormed into my suite. They tore apart every drawer, every closet, every piece of luggage. They found my other Christian books, hidden in coat pockets, inside decorative boxes, between pages of fashion magazines. They found the journal where I had written prayers to Jesus. They found everything. My father didn't come to see me immediately. That was somehow worse, the waiting, knowing the storm that was coming. I was locked in my rooms for 3 days. No phone. No internet. Guards posted at my doors. Food brought on trays, and left without a word. On the 3rd day, he finally came. I had never seen my father cry before. Saudi men, especially royal Saudi men, don't cry. But when he entered my room, his face was wet. Not with sadness, with rage so intense it had nowhere else to go. How dare you? His voice was barely above a whisper, which was more terrifying than if he had shouted. How dare you bring this shame on our family, on our bloodline, on everything our ancestors built? Father, His hand moved so fast, I didn't see it coming. The slap sent me sprawling across the marble floor. My ear rang. Blood filled my mouth from where my teeth cut my cheek. You will renounce this, he said. Tomorrow, there will be a council of religious scholars. You will tell them you were confused, misled. You will recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger, and you will beg Allah's forgiveness. And perhaps, we can avoid the worst of this. I stayed on the floor. Blood dripped onto white marble. And I thought about Jesus, beaten and bleeding, refusing to deny who he was even when it would have saved his life. No. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded braver than I felt. I won't deny him, Father. I can't. My father stared at me like I was already dead. Then you are no longer my daughter. The tribunal was held in a private chamber of the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. Not a public trial. This was too embarrassing for that. The royal family couldn't let it be known that a princess had committed apostasy. So they would deal with me quietly. Permanently. 3 religious judges sat before me. Harsh men with harsh faces and eyes that had already decided my fate before I walked into the room. The proceedings lasted less than an hour. They asked me if I had rejected Islam. I said yes. They asked if I had accepted Christianity. I said yes. They asked if I would recant. I said no. The sentence was pronounced at 4:37 p.m., death by beheading, to be carried out within 72 hours at a secure location. My father signed the order himself. Would you have denied Jesus to save your life? I want you to really think about that. Because it's easy to say you'd stand firm when you're sitting safely wherever you are right now. It's different when you're staring at a legal document with your execution date written in formal Arabic calligraphy. I was transferred that night. Not to a regular prison. Those have records, paper trails, possibilities of international intervention. No, I was taken to a facility 400 kilometers into the desert. A place where the Saudi royal family makes problems disappear. A place that officially doesn't exist. The drive took 6 hours in the back of an unmarked van, my hands zip-tied, a black hood over my head. When they finally removed the hood, I saw nothing but sand in every direction. The prison was built half underground to escape the desert heat. Concrete bunkers that looked like they'd been abandoned decades ago, but were very much operational. My cell was 10 feet by 6 feet. Concrete walls, concrete floor, concrete ceiling. One metal cot with no mattress. A hole in the ground for a toilet. A single barred window 8 feet up that let in a shaft of sunlight for maybe 2 hours a day. The temperature during the day reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit. At night, It dropped to near freezing. I was given water once a day, lukewarm, tasting of rust and chemicals. Food was a piece of flatbread, and sometimes a handful of dates. The guards spoke to me only to tell me how many days I had left. Then, how many hours? The psychological torture was worse than the physical conditions. The guards would describe the execution in detail, how the sword would feel, how long it would take, whether I would feel pain. They told me my body wouldn't receive a proper burial, not Muslim, not Christian, just left for the desert to claim. They told me my name would be erased from all family records. I would become a non-person. On my final night, March 14th, 2023, I couldn't sleep. How could anyone sleep knowing what morning would bring? I sat on that metal cot and I prayed. I prayed for 8 straight hours. I prayed every prayer I knew, and then I just talked to Jesus like he was sitting beside me in that cell. I don't understand why this is happening, I whispered into the darkness. I don't understand why following you costs so much. But I don't regret it. Even now, even facing tomorrow, I don't regret choosing you. If this is the end, then let my death mean something. Let someone, somewhere, hear my story and know that you are worth dying for. At exactly 3:33 a.m., something impossible happened. The cell filled with light. Not from the window. The sun wouldn't rise for hours. This light came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Brighter than the Saudi sun at noon, but somehow it didn't hurt my eyes. And in that light, I saw him. Jesus. Standing in my cell, dressed in white that made the light seem dim by comparison, with eyes that held more love than I had ever imagined possible. He didn't speak audibly, but I heard his voice in my mind, in my heart, in every part of me. Amira, my beloved daughter, I am with you. I have always been with you. And tomorrow, the world will see my power. Do not be afraid. Then the light faded. He was gone. But the peace remained. A peace that made absolutely no logical sense considering I was hours away from execution. But it was there, solid and unshakable, and I knew that whatever happened next, Jesus was in control. I actually slept after that. Deep, dreamless sleep. I woke to the sound of guards unlocking my cell. Dawn light was starting to filter through the high window. The head guard looked at his watch. 6:40 a.m., he announced. It's time. They pulled me to my feet. My legs were weak from days of poor nutrition and no exercise, but they half-dragged me down the corridor anyway. Other prisoners, I didn't know there were others, watched through their cell bars as I passed. Some looked away. One old man mouthed what looked like a prayer. We climbed stairs cut into the desert rock. The morning air hit my face, already hot, already dry. The execution courtyard was a square of packed sand surrounded by concrete walls. And there, in the center, I saw him, the executioner, dressed in black, face covered, holding a sword that caught the rising sun and threw light in sharp, cutting angles. They positioned me in the center of the courtyard, forced me to my knees. My hands were bound behind my back with coarse rope that cut into my wrists. A guard grabbed my hair and pulled my head forward, exposing my neck. The executioner began his prayers, the ritual recitations required before execution in Islamic law. I looked up at the sky. Perfectly clear. Not a single cloud. Just endless blue, and the sun beginning its climb above the horizon. And I prayed one final prayer. Jesus, into your hands I commit my spirit. The executioner raised his sword. I could see it from the corner of my eye, the blade lifted high, ready to fall. 6 minutes before execution had become 30 seconds. Then the sky changed. It happened so fast that at first no one processed it. The clear blue sky suddenly darkened. Not with clouds, with sand. A wall of sand that appeared from absolutely nowhere, moving at impossible speed. Within seconds, the wind hit us like a physical force. A sandstorm. In clear weather. With no warning. Moving at what I later learned was over 90 miles per hour. The executioner staggered backward, dropping his sword. Guards shouted, trying to cover their faces against the stinging sand that suddenly filled the air like a solid brown curtain. Visibility dropped to 0. The wind howled like something alive and angry. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. In the chaos, I felt hands on my wrists. The ropes fell away. Someone, I couldn't see, who through the blinding sand, pulled me to my feet, pressed something into my hands.
Keys.
And clothing, a guard's uniform. A voice shouted in my ear in English. God sent me for you.
Run.
Building 3, north wall, second door. Vehicle waiting. Go now. I ran. Blindly, my hands stretched in front of me, my eyes squeezed nearly shut against the sand. I hit a wall, felt along it, found a door. Inside was darker but clearer, the building providing shelter from the storm. I shed my prison clothes and pulled on the guard uniform with shaking hands. The keys opened a side door. And there, engine running, was a beat-up Toyota pickup truck. I drove. I had learned to drive in London, but never in desert conditions, never in a sandstorm, never with my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The truck had a GPS unit taped to the dashboard with coordinates already programmed in. I followed them blindly, driving through sand that reduced the world to 50 feet of visibility. The storm lasted 47 minutes. I timed it later, trying to make sense of what happened. Meteorologists I've since spoken to say that storm was impossible. Sandstorms don't appear in clear weather. They don't spring up instantly with hurricane-force winds. They don't end as abruptly as they begin. But God doesn't need permission from meteorology to perform miracles. The GPS led me north and west, avoiding main roads, following camel trails and smugglers' routes through the desert. I drove for 6 days. The truck had emergency supplies, water, dried food, extra fuel. I drove during twilight hours when the heat was bearable, hid during the day under rocky outcroppings, prayed constantly. On the 6th day, I crossed into Jordan. Not at an official border crossing. Those would have had my face flagged in every security system. But through a route used by Bedouins for centuries, through mountains where borders are theoretical lines rather than walls and checkpoints. A Christian aid organization was waiting on the Jordanian side. They'd been contacted by the mysterious guard who freed me. I never learned his name or how he ended up in that prison, but I believe God placed him there for that exact moment. The organization had connections, resources, and experience extracting persecuted Christians from hostile countries. Within a week, I was granted emergency asylum by a Western nation. I can't tell you which one. My safety and the safety of others still in Saudi Arabia depends on some details remaining secret. What I can tell you is that I'm alive. I'm free. And I'm using my story to help other women trapped in similar situations. It's been 2 years now since that morning in the desert. Since the execution that never happened. Since Jesus reversed a verdict that was supposed to be final. I run an online ministry now for Muslim women seeking Jesus. We operate through encrypted channels and anonymous networks. I've personally helped over 200 women find Christ. Some are still secret believers in their home countries. Others have escaped and are building new lives in freedom. We have a network that helps women and men flee persecution, a modern underground railroad powered by faith and coordinated by believers around the world. My father has officially declared me dead. In Saudi records, Princess Amira al-Rashid died of a sudden illness in early 2023. There was a funeral, an empty grave, speeches about what a faithful daughter I was. The irony isn't lost on me. But here's what I need you to understand. Jesus didn't promise me a comfortable life. He didn't promise me that following him would be easy or safe or socially acceptable. What he promised was his presence. He promised that he would never leave me or forsake me. He promised that in this world I would have trouble, but to take heart because he has overcome the world. And on that morning in the desert, when that blade was lifted over my neck, he proved those promises weren't just pretty words. They were reality. They were power. They were a sandstorm that appeared from nowhere and reversed what every human authority said was irreversible. So let me ask you something. What verdict has been pronounced over your life that you think is final? What situation are you facing right now that seems impossible to overcome? What are you afraid of losing if you fully surrender to Christ? I lost everything. My family, my country, my name, my identity, all the wealth and privilege I was born into. Every single thing the world says matters. And you know what I gained? Everything. I gained freedom. Real freedom, not the fake version behind palace walls. I gained purpose. I gained peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. I gained the presence of Jesus Christ himself walking with me through fire and emerging with me on the other side. There are still nights when I wake up terrified. When I remember the sound of that sword being drawn. When I wonder about my mother, who I'll probably never see again. When I scroll through news from Saudi Arabia and see the places I used to call home and feel the ache of exile. But then I remember that light in my cell at 3:33 a.m. I remember Jesus standing there, real and present, and loving me with an intensity that made execution seem insignificant. And I remember his words, "I am with you." He was with me in the palace when I felt most alone. He was with me in that church in London when I first picked up his word. He was with me in the underground prayer meetings where 30 scared believers clung to each other and to him. He was with me in that desert prison. He was in the sandstorm. And he's with me now, living under a name that isn't the one I was born with, in a place I never expected to call home, doing work I never imagined I'd do. If Jesus can reverse a death sentence in the Saudi desert, he can handle whatever impossible situation you're facing. If he can send a supernatural sandstorm at the exact moment a blade was about to fall, he can intervene in your circumstances in ways you haven't even imagined yet. The question isn't whether God is powerful enough to save you. The question is whether you're willing to trust him even when the blade is raised. Whether you're willing to say yes to Jesus even when everything in your life says you should say no. Whether you're willing to lose everything the world offers in exchange for the one thing that actually matters, him. I was Princess Amira al-Rashid. Now I'm just Amira. No title, no palace, no royal bloodline. Just a woman who met Jesus and discovered that he's worth more than every crown on earth. And if you're hearing my story right now, maybe it's because you're standing at your own crossroads. Maybe you're being asked to choose between comfort and Christ, between cultural expectations and kingdom reality, between keeping your life and actually living. I can't make that choice for you. No one can. But I can tell you that whatever you lose for his sake, you'll gain something infinitely more valuable. And whatever verdict the world has pronounced over you, whether it's death, failure, unworthiness, impossibility, Jesus specializes in reversals. He reversed death itself when he walked out of that tomb 2,000 years ago. Reversing your impossible situation? That's just another Tuesday for him. The sandstorm in the desert wasn't just about saving my life. It was God making a statement. It was him saying that no human authority, no matter how powerful, has the final word. No execution order, no family rejection, no cultural condemnation, no threat of death can override what Jesus declares. And what he declares over you, if you're his, is this: beloved, forgiven, free, called, chosen, worth dying for. I know because he proved it when he died for you first. And he proved it again when he sent a storm to save one Saudi princess who dared to believe that a Bible hidden in a Louis Vuitton bag might contain more truth than all the gold palaces in Riyadh. My prayer is that someone hearing this will find the courage to open their own Bible, to whisper their own 3 a.m. prayers to Jesus, to choose faith over fear, and to discover that when you lose everything for Christ, you actually gain the only thing that matters. The blade never fell. Jesus made sure of it. And whatever blade is hanging over your life right now, whatever sentence seems final, whatever situation seems hopeless, remember that the same Jesus who reversed my verdict can reverse yours. All you have to do is trust him, even when it costs everything, especially when it costs everything. Because on the other side of that sacrifice, you'll find that everything you gave up was nothing compared to everything you gained. His name is Jesus, and he's still reversing verdicts. Starting today. Starting with yours.